issue. I'm very hopeful. So with that introduction, is this supposed to advance? Oh, no, sorry. Yeah. So it's best to think of there are in fact two different worlds we live in. The first world, or the top world, is the 1 billion of us who are living as if there is no, limit to how much we can burn fossil fuels, and symbolically assure cities. On the bottom, you see the bottom 3 billion who don't even know fossil fuels exist because they can't afford it, they can't access it. So they are still living the way we all lived about 2 centuries ago. But these two worlds exist together. We realized this because last year, my wife and I went to villages in India and lived there. And every 5-6 days, it was so difficult, it was so horrible. So we used to escape to the nearest city for just a cold glass of beer and then come back. So we went back and forth. So I'm going to take you through this journey very quickly in the next video. So it'll start soon, hopefully, yes. So we are starting with the woman's kitchen. It's a village in North India. She was one of the volunteers for the project we were working on of giving them clean cooking. And we will learn that smoke kills about 4 million women and children. And you can see how it escapes from their huts. And this is the middle of the day, and you can see inside their house is still dark. And all they have is that kerosene lamp. Okay? And while her sons are playing cricket, the woman and her daughters have to walk 2 kilometers to get firewood for the next day's cooking. Okay? She has to walk another 3 kilometers to get the water from the village. And you'll see a scary frog. And you'll see she has to carry, oh, the movie is gone. Oh, sorry. She has to put 2 pots of water. You'll see the second one. She can't afford to lose even a drop. Okay? And I was eating in her house. It's for cooking and all her children, everybody taking a bath. And the other shocking, this was about 6 days. We got too tired. We went to a resort just 20 kilometers away, where there's abundance of water. Okay? There's a swimming pool. I was tempted, but I couldn't drop in the swimming. I was thinking of this woman suffering there. Okay? Then we go to the biggest city, Mumbai. Millions live on these slums. And so that's the hotel we stayed. This is my world number 1. That is one person's house. Okay, 20 stories. And you can see I joined the first world with my glass of beer. It is so easy to forget. Just within half a day, your mind leaves that problem behind. So now, to introduce you to some numbers, if you look at the total energy consumption, 50% of the energy is consumed by 1 billion on the top, while the bottom 3 billion, less than 6%. Okay? And so what does this consumption mean? How do you get this climate change? Smokestacks, our industries, cars, and then clearing forests to put our houses and apartments, agriculture to feeding 7 billion. Soon we have to feed 9 billion. On the bottom left corner is my grandmother's kitchen. And of course, she's not alive anymore. but the people living in our former house are still doing the same thing. And you can all expect, I'm going to show you how this pollution really influences climate. So let's ask this question. That could be the highway, although that's Boulder, Colorado, where we used to live. That could be the San Diego-Tijuana highway. So why should somebody driving in that car worry about what my grandmother is cooking with? Likewise, why should my grandmother, sitting peacefully in a village, worry about what car you and I are driving? Take a look at closely the next movie. This was a scientific video of how fast air parcels move. And if you follow that, you can see less than 5 days, air from China travels to America. Okay? And in less than 2-3 days, so while the Chinese are sending their gifts to America and Mexico, us, we send our gift to the Europeans in 3 days. And the Europeans send their gift to China. Okay? And you can also see how biomass burning in Africa, savanna burning, or in Brazil, dives into the Antarctic. So those are the reasons our glaciers are melting. Okay? So what is the lesson we learn from this? Is that we are all in this together. We are not going to solve this problem by me sitting in San Diego and blaming Mexico for our pollution, or likewise South America complaining about what North America is doing. We have to solve this problem together. Okay, because the air travels so fast, the pollution has no boundaries. So this is what we are now doing. This is what came out of the Pope Francis's conference we organized. So we are saying pursuit of the common good. I'm going to walk you through that. And then the other is religious institutions may mobilize public opinion and action. So we think science and religion working together is what's going to solve this problem. Okay? So this call, came 10 years ago. I was doing an experiment with aircraft and ships in the middle of the Indian Ocean off of Maldives. I still can't forget that day. This was 2003. After staying up in the hot sun, looking at my aircraft coming back and forth, after about 8-9 hours, I got tired to my village guest house, and I opened up my email. That's what we all do these days. And I see this message from Vatican. And my immediate response was, this was a junk spam email. So I was going to hit the delete button. Then I opened it. And the first sentence was, the Holy Father is pleased to invite you to join the Pontifical Academy of Science. And there was something remarkable. I don't know how many of you are scientists. For scientists, the most prestigious thing is to join this National Academy of Science. Now, Mexico has its own academy. US has its academy of about millions of scientists. Only 2,000 are admitted to the academy. So it's very prestigious for scientists to be in these academies. The Pontifical Academy has only 85 from all over the world. What I was surprised while I thought this was a spam email is that I'm not a Christian. I'm a Hindu. So it was when I joined that academy, the Academy of the Vatican is purely non-denominational. We advise the Pope, but they mainly on scientific excellence. And in fact, there are many members or atheists. They have declared themselves. But this is not something many people know. So for 10 years, we worked there and we worked with them to sensitize them about what's happening with the environment. And now this was the meeting which happened in May. We organized this workshop called Sustainable Humanity, Sustainable Nature. It was remarkable. You see, next to me is a world-renowned economist. He's at Cambridge University, Sir Dasgupta. And next to Sir Dasgupta is Archbishop of France, and we, the three of us. And it's amazing how having a religious person impacts. If we thought of this title, Sustainable Humanity, Sustainable Nature, Archbishop may not have seen the title, but isn't it our responsibility? So we added the word our responsibility. It had a huge impact on the whole. And then you can see behind Pope Francis is the chair of our academy, Werner Arber. He made some fundamental discoveries about DNA, RNA, and he got his Nobel Prize in the 70s. So these are all out of this. So I'm going to talk to you about what came out of this workshop. So I need to give you about a minute of background on the science. So you may wonder, the stuff which comes out of the tailpipe of your car, it's colorless. And if you're not in the field, it is hard to believe this thing is heating the planet, melting the glaciers, causing drought, right? But you saw that movie I showed you, how fast things go. The stuff which comes out of your car, we call it carbon dioxide, or everything you burn becomes this carbon dioxide gas. 50% of it stays for 100 years. That is the problem, okay? So it surrounds the planet like a blanket, and the basic energy for this planet is sunlight. That's what keeps us warm. And then the planet gives off the heat, but this blanket of gases, just like a blanket on a cold winter night, keeps you warm by trapping your body heat. The blanket doesn't give you any heat, it just traps your body heat. Same way, this blanket of gases traps the heat from the Earth and heats up the planet. This is based on well-known sound physics, quantum mechanics. It is sad for me to see how the skeptics have turned this into junk science. Over now 20, 30,000 top scientists in the world are working on this problem. So, and I want to tell you, some of you may think, oh, this whole thing, all this science just happened in the last 5, 10 years. No, people have been working on this for 100 years. And I got into this 40 years ago. So I got curious after 5 years, when are we going to see this warming? So we made a prediction, scientific prediction, I don't think such a one has been made, that if this theory is real, we should see the warming by 2000. Okay, that was our prediction, based on analysis. And that, unfortunately, was proved right. This was a summary by over 2,000 scientists. What you see here is the temperature of the planet on the vertical, and the horizontal is the year, starting from 1880. So you can see how it has steadily gone up and up and up. It was by year 2000, the warming became large enough to be detectable against background noise. Okay? So and the planet has warmed by about 1.5 degrees Fahrenheit, or about 0.9 degrees Celsius, close to 1 degree. So what are these consequences? This global temperature is a mythical number in the sense it's averaged over the whole thing. But it's like the fever you get when you're sick. The fever is not the issue, it's a symptom. Okay, so what are the real issues, the vital signs? So take the California drought. That's Folsom Lake in 5 years. It has become bone dry. So that's how fast climate can change. A lot of people think still, oh, these guys are talking about Greenland glaciers and it's 100 years down the road. I'm not going to say all this drought is from global warming, but global warming contributed to making it worse. The other problem, why I'm starting from California, certain regions are going to get hit hard, and certain may even benefit. The latitude belt we live, including Tijuana, California, are the regions which are going to become dry with global warming. Okay? And we have seen this steadily. So what's the issue of drought? We have technology, we can drill deep, get the water, we can desalinate our ocean. That may be some people's response. But climate change, when you dry the land, you've lost the stuff which keeps our trees from burning. Okay? So you dry the soil, the fiber becomes ideal fuel. So we have seen, in California at least, the frequency of fires have increased significantly over the last 40 years. Okay? What's the other issue with global warming? When you heat the ocean is what fuels all the storms. Your tropical storms are going to get intense, and we see things like Philippines extreme events. Okay, that's the Philippines Haiyan cyclone. This is close to where my birth country, India, we expect when it rains, it's going to pour because the air has more water. So these kind of intense floods is going to become frequent. Areas which has drought can also have floods because when the rain comes, it'll pour. Okay? The other thing, there are things happening insidiously which we don't experience. This is a study which we published early this year, the Arctic. We know the Arctic is melting, but what's the big deal with that Arctic except polar bears? It turns out the ice on the top is 40 years ago, the bottom is now. Why is that white? Because ice reflects sunlight. That's what keeps the Arctic region colder. So once you blow the ice away, you expose the dark ocean. And we found, on the bottom side, you see this dark blue. Those are the regions the ice has gone. Intense sunlight is heating. So we are worried this could start, kind of what we call tipping point type feedback. Okay? Things like this are happening in many parts of the world. So what I'm going to do is, remember I made a forecast in 1980 that unfortunately came true. We used the same approach to make a forecast. And we warned in a paper published in 2008 that the planet, if we continue like this, ignore scientists, these guys are sitting in ivory tower. They don't know what they're talking about. And so it's going to heat up by another 100%. We have already seen close to a degree, it could go to 2 degrees. Not 100 years from now, but 35 years from now. Our lifetime, perhaps not mine, but most of the audience I see, young people, so your lifetime, definitely. Okay? And if we ignore it still, it's going to warm up by another 300% by end of this century, which is definitely the lifetime of your children and grandchildren. So just to give you a perspective, this thing shows how the temperature of the planet has changed over the last 1,000 years, 1,500 years. And you can see it's pretty stable. In fact, it was pretty stable if you go back 5,000 years. And many scientists, climatologists, and anthropologists are saying it was because of that stable climate for the last 5,000 years, civilization could flourish. Before that, it was rocky, ice ages, this. And now what we are doing is pushing that climate. You can see, I put our world, that's now, on the right extreme, you can see we are off the charts. Somewhere between 2 to 4 degrees. And that's our grandchildren's world. This raises the issue of intergenerational equity. should we think about what kind of a planet we are leaving for our grandchildren, or we just assume they'll be smarter, they'll take care of it? Okay? And at that level, sea level here, where I am now, in San Diego, initially we used to think it's half to 1 meter. It didn't look too large. Now there's rapid melting of the Antarctic and Greenland glaciers. The possibility is could be 4 to 6 meters. Okay? Certainly, if I come back 100 years, I have to have underwater gear right in this auditorium to give this talk. Fortunately, it's still not too late to solve the problem. Okay? So now let's, another couple of minutes of education on the science behind it, and then I'll go to the pursuit of the common good issue. So one of the biggest culprit of this is the stuff which colorless gas which comes out of your tailpipe, carbon dioxide. Okay? And one of the pioneering measurements were made by Professor Keeling from the institution I come from, University of California, San Diego. You can see how the carbon dioxide has stubbornly, steadily, monotonically increased non-stop. If anything, it's going steeper. Okay? So at 400 parts per million, what it means is that if we collect molecules in a cube, out of every million molecules, there are 400 of these CO2. It has never gotten that level in the last million years. So that's one of the blanket. And for nearly a century, scientists thought that was the only way we are impacting the planet. And, So I stumbled on a major discovery in 1975. Oh, it's not only carbon dioxide, we are putting other pollutants. This is chlorofluorocarbons, which is used as refrigerants. In fact, when I published this, very few believed it, because I was saying these chlorofluorocarbons, which are used in our refrigerators, are 10,000 times more potent than carbon dioxide. Okay? Now, of course, it's widely accepted. This compound was banned because of its impact on the ozone layer, which is a different problem. And a famous Mexican scientist got the Nobel Prize for discovering the ozone effect, Mario Molina. But my work was that discovery of it also had a greenhouse effect. So now, if you want, what are the various pollutants trapping the heat? That's a pie chart. I don't expect you to know all the things. Carbon dioxide is half the problem. The other half comes from these other pollutants. After I discovered the chlorofluorocarbon, which is part of what we call halocarbon, numerous other rogue elements were added. Now the advantage is this also has an advantage. That's the crux of the solution. The CO2, which is 50% of the problem, we have to bring its emissions down. I'll show you how we can do that. But that is the top 1 billion problem. But the key thing is the CO2 I emit in San Diego will heat the entire planet. It's just not a local problem. Okay? These other pollutants, this part of the halocarbons, and I have a blue thing called BC, black carbon. That's what comes out of our diesel tailpipes or when you burn wood. There are 4 of them there. We have technologies to cut their thing by 90%. I'll show you some ways. So each one of us can do that. So we can get some quick relief from the warming by cutting down the guys on the right-hand side, and the whole world has to work on that, whereas the left-hand side is the top 1 billion problem. Yeah. Now, I showed you 50% of the emissions comes from 1 billion. But it's increasing. The sad part is, see, that emission of carbon dioxide is related to our prosperity, unfortunately. because the more fossil fuel you have, you become richer, your wealth increases. That increase is not coming because the poor are becoming middle class. That increase is coming because the top 1 billion is increasing their emission even more. Okay? So clearly, that's not acceptable, given the fact that it's going to increase our sea level by several meters. So now we come back to, now you say it's an issue of ethics and morality. As a scientist, or even our leaders like President Obama and others, we don't have the moral authority to tell someone to change their behavior. But religious leaders do. So now the question is, what is the cause of this problem? And Das Gupta, who is an economist, has convincingly shown it is our obsessive focus on growth and GDP have created a behavior that's at odds with the pursuit of the common good. Why is that? We are already putting out 50%, and we are increasing it even more. But the ones who are going to be affected worst are the 3 billion. Why is that? Let's say the sea level goes up. I can easily move to the 10th floor. I can go to a high-rise building. If it gets too hot, which it's going to, I can buy more air conditioners. But then the ones living on the bottom 3 billion, when there are floods and sea level rise, they're just going to get washed out. Okay? So what we concluded was there was urgent need for collective action from the community level to the international level. Yeah. So now I'm going to briefly introduce to the solutions, and then if you have any questions, I'll be glad to. What we need to do is the top 1 billion need to decarbonize the economy. I'm not saying we should go back to the Stone Ages. I'm not saying we should reduce our standard of living. By all means, we should try to improve that even. But I'm saying don't burn fossil fuel to do that. Switch to renewable fuels. Solar, we can generate electricity by solar, wind power, geothermal, and also what I call the biofuels, but not corn ethanol, but using other bio stuff, marine algae, or the tree cellulosic ethanol, etc. The other thing I want to talk about, we should reduce waste. To give you how serious a problem the waste is, 1/3 of the food we produce is wasted. It's not eaten by us. That, the amount of energy we consume to produce that wasted food is the 3rd largest source of this carbon dioxide. Next to America and China, the 3rd largest source is food waste. Okay? So how much is it going to cost? And I worked with various things to estimate this. It's about $1,000 per person amongst the top 1 billion. It can be thought of huge. It can also be thought of, is it only that much? Okay? But how do we know if that $1,000 is worth paying for this? We have to weigh down the other costs. Increase of sea level. Forest fires destroy so much in California, houses. Okay? Flooding. You see the Midwest in the US flooding every year. So you weigh those costs, what we call weighing the natural capital in this cost, and then figure out, is it worth for us to do? The second thing, that is intergenerational equity. The second is intragenerational equity, in which we provide clean energy access to the bottom 3 billion. I'm not saying we should do this as the goodness of our heart. It'll be nice if we do that. But even for pure selfish interests, we have to do that. Because if we don't do that, they're all going to climb using fossil fuels. So if this bottom 3 billion use the fossil fuel at the rate we are using, the emission would go up by 50%. We have to bring down the emission by 15, so it'll go up by 50. Okay? And what is the cost of that? It's about $250 a person if it is shared by the top 1 billion. Okay? So these are not impossible problems to solve. So this is where we concluded at the end of this workshop. That's just inside the Vatican, and the building you see is where we all used to stay, and cardinals who elect the Pope. It's called Domus Santa Marta. Pope used to live in a residence of his own. You can see from the Peter's Basilica, you can see. This Pope moved with us. So he is living on the 2nd floor. And normally when I met Pope John Paul and Pope Benedict, was one of the most, amazing hall, full of paintings by, famous artist Michelangelo's frescoes, and the Pope will be sitting there. It was just, but this Pope met us in the parking lot. So that's how people-oriented he is. So he felt that we'll be more relaxed, we can talk to him. So I was asked to brief him about what we found. And it was, this audience, you may laugh at this. So we were walking from our meeting because they just gave us 10 minutes to walk across. And the Chancellor of the Academy, whose face is half hidden, Bishop Marcelo Serrando, he said, Ram, if you talk to him in Spanish, he will be more warm and respond to you, Spanish or Italian. I told him, I don't know. Anyway, he said, you can only tell him 2 sentences. That's all the time he has. So he coached me in Spanish to say these 2 sentences. So I was memorizing it, and as I was walking, and as soon as Pope Francis came and he had this amazing smile, I forgot my Spanish sentences. I became so nervous. This was the only picture of 100 pictures where I'm smiling. In all the other pictures, I'm terrorized. And then I decided I'm going to say Pope in English. And I a little bit cheated. They gave me 2 sentences. I told him 3 sentences. And the 3 I told him were, this entire group, we are concerned about climate change. And the poor are going to be worst affected who had nothing to do with this. And the 3rd sentence, which I didn't have permission, I told him was, all we need from you is that in your speeches, can you please urge people to be better stewards of the planet, which is, I believe, within the Catholic doctrine. I think I may be running out of time. I can quickly go to the last one. This I already mentioned. So what is the transformational step we need? We would like massive mobilization of public opinion by the Vatican and other religions. Okay? And we are so fortunate to have Pope Francis, who most consider as the moral leader of this century, right? We were blessed. But fortunately, his appeal goes beyond the Catholic religion. And I'll tell you what, I wanted to quickly take you to see what's happening in the bottom 3 billion world, because I talk about collective action. So this is not something we need to wait for the President Obama of the world to take action. They are taking action, but a lot of actions from individual can happen. So to give you an example, this was the woman with there are about 3 billion who do this. And you can see how the smoke from her house escapes outdoors. It's behind the Himalayas. And there are 100 million homes like this. So that smoke settles on the glaciers and melts the glaciers in addition to killing people. And so we started this project, Surya, in which we documented carefully and replacing cook stoves with clean cook stoves, okay, because we know how to cook without producing pollution. So My daughter, who was an NGO, joined me in this, and she used cell phones to document all this. And using her instruments, we found out which cook stove cuts down the pollution. The right-hand side, you say, is the cook stove we are recommending. It cut down the pollution by 90%. The left-hand side is the mud stove, okay? The problem is it costs $70. And these women, their take-home pay is about $1. Yeah. And so we have now started a carbon credit project by which anyone here can offset their carbon footprint by buying these stoves, okay? And then we have a way to monitor, see if they're really using the stove. And the last example I want to give is that, remember I said there are 4 other pollutants which is causing half the warming? One of this is this black carbon from cook stoves and diesel. California in the last 25 years has cut its diesel black carbon emission by 90% by cleaning our vehicles and trucks with filters and refining the fuel. So these technologies are there. There's no reason for us to emit these pollutants. 10, 20 years ago, we didn't know that they were causing melting of the glaciers, but now we know. So these kind of bilateral partnerships can go a long way. So, the Indian government is involved, our Governor Jerry Brown is involved, team of us have developed a 12-point plan to, cut down. So these are community level, local actions. Oh, my thing is, all right. So ultimately, I want to appeal not to our generosity, I want to appeal to our selfish interests to take action. Mine is here, that's my granddaughter, right? What kind of a planet are we leaving for them? And remember, if you're going to mess up the lives of about 4 billion, we know all the conflicts that's happening because of the poor, inequality. So it's just going to get worse for our children to continue their standard of living amongst this chaos, okay? So this is what Pope Francis said. It's just a remarkable statement. My whole talk is in this 4 lines, so I'm going to read it loud. This is about 2 weeks after a workshop. He said, creation is not a property which we can rule over at will, or even less is the property of only a few. He's responding to my 1 billion. Creation is a gift that we care for it and we use it for the benefit of all, always with great respect and gratitude. That fits in with all the religions. Thank you. I believe there's time for questions if I have not already overdone my time.
Tengo 2 preguntas para nuestro conferencista. Una de ellas, no sé si puedan traducir, le preguntan acerca de si puede la religión y la ciencia crear un discurso común que realmente ayude y llegue a toda la población para concientizarla de los cambios que se tienen que hacer para el cuidado del planeta. A ver. Y una pregunta más también para nuestro invitado en lo que tiene que ver con los cambios más importantes en la ingeniería ambiental para el rol de parar este cambio climático y darle sustentabilidad al planeta? Son las dos preguntas que tengo para nuestro conferencista. No sé, ahí viene. Sí, necesitamos para the translation. A ver si me va a ayudar Claudia. Y para la entrega del reconocimiento.
Just a minute.
Sí, aquí está don José Galicos, el mejor traductor.
How are you, sir?
La primera pregunta
The first
es
question is,
¿qué cambios
what changes,
pueden hacerse en ingeniería ambiental en todo lo que
what
tiene
could
que
you
ver
do in,
con parar el cambio climático y darle sustentabilidad al planeta?
what changes can we do in the engineering to stop this situation that is coming very badly? You can talk there.
So I'm going to assume the question is what steps individually we can take. I think the first is what we need is education of the people at large, and particularly education of our children, of what's the future and why they should be environmentally conscious. And the second is individually, we can take steps. If we can afford it, then I would strongly suggest switching to solar power. And in the latitudes we live, up to about 40 degrees north to 40 degrees south, solar has already turned out to be as expensive or as cheap as coal-fired plants. And I have solar in my house, and it was initially expensive, but in 7 years, I have not paid much electric bill, so it has paid itself. So the next 7 years is free. So solar is not as expensive as we all think. And the third is to avoid waste. And we can work over with our city and national governments. See, when I fly into San Diego, even if it's 11, 12 in the night, all the buildings are burning light. It's a colossal waste. We can put motion-sensitive light. I know we need lights for security. But there are multiple ways, so-called smart system. So I'm not talking about people going back to 100 years ago. I'm talking about avoiding waste, improving our efficiency, and switching to renewables.
And the second question, how can religion and science create a common discourse that can help reach the population without preaching to the choir? How do you get the interest of the skeptics?
Thank you. That is an excellent question. As you know, religion and science don't mix many a times. But fortunately, in the case of the environment, science and religion are saying the same thing, right? That this God-given earth doesn't have infinite capacity to ignore our abuse. So we all know we are living in a limited world. The only limitless source is sun. So let's tap into that, okay? And as you have seen with my experience at the Vatican, religion really can help. I haven't found a single resistance. And so much so, some of us are now trying to get a summit of religious leaders sometime next year. We have not proposed it. And why next year? because fall of 2015 is the World Summit on climate change. If we don't come with that summit with an agreement, then it will take another 8 years for them to meet like that. By that time, we would have put probably another 400 billion tons of these pollutants. Just imagine that. Okay? Every year we put 40 billion tons. That's equivalent to putting 20 billion cars in the air and just circling. So we are thinking, if we organize the summit of the world religious leaders, they will send a powerful message, and hopefully that will help our leaders, public support.
Professor, we would like to present you with a token of our gratitude and also a little memento of this conference, together with a question of my personal question. What is your opinion about our countries, especially the United States and Mexico, have instituted controls for emissions, emission controls for automobiles and also for industry? How much has it improved or affected the winter effect in general, or has it improved? You presented some figures, but in general, can it be part of the solution? And please accept this as a token of our gratitude. It's a sculpture which is a winner for a winner. Thank you very much.
Should I answer the question?
Please answer the question.
Sorry?
If you can answer that question.
Yes.
Thank you.
I'm so glad you asked this question. That was what I was suggesting when I talked about the India-California program. It is these sort of bilateral agreements which is going to solve this issue. If we wait for 160 leaders of the world to sign on a piece of paper, I feel we'll all be buried under meters of water. This bilateral stuff is what we need. And for example, you said I didn't talk about the results. California, in the last 25 years, has cut down one of these global warming pollutants by 80%. Why did we do that? Because the same smoke was killing people. So we did it to improve the health, and we ended up cooling the climate. So this Mexico-American vehicle emissions is an important step.
No sé si ustedes saben quién es él. Él es el hombre más importante, el mejor, el más dedicado en ecología en el mundo, y el Vaticano lo considera incluso que él no es católico, él es hindú, él es el hombre que el Vaticano ha escogido como su representante en el mundo en ecología. Tenemos un personaje formidable, el doctor Ramanathan, extraordinario, y yo quisiera que nos dijera unas últimas palabras porque ha llegado mucho público que quisiera que oyera una última frase de cuál es el mensaje que él puede decir, what's the message that you can say to these young people that came, and what's the message that you can tell them as your last message now about how to take care of this land.
I think for all the young people, this is your problem.
If you allow me, I will translate.
No, just yeah, right. So first, we created this problem, and it has become your problem, and you have to solve it.
Dice que el primer problema es que nuestra generación creó el problema y ustedes tienen el problema y ahora les toca a ustedes ayudar a resolverlo.
So, what are some of the first things you can take? Is that leaders listen to young people. You may not think so, but it is the case. So
Uno
you-
de los casos, un primer caso que tienen que hacer es que los líderes, los ruquitos, los viejitos como mi cuate, todos nosotros escuchamos a los jóvenes, aunque ustedes no lo crean.
So you can tell your parents to cut down their carbon pollution. You can tell your teachers, and you can tell your local mayors.
Ustedes pueden decirles a sus padres, a sus maestros y a los alcaldes que tienen que bajar el consumo de hidrocarburos. Ese es el mensaje. Tenemos que cambiar juntos el consumo de hidrocarburos. Ustedes van a vivir en un mundo, you are going to live in a world that needs to be clean because otherwise, porque de otra manera vamos a vivir en un mundo terrible. Otherwise we are going to live in a very terrible world. Yes, the action is when? When should be the action?
Today.
La acción es hoy.
Muchas gracias. Gracias por acompañarnos en esta jornada. Este hombre es el segundo científico más importante en el mundo que tiene que ver precisamente con estos temas. Gracias por acompañarnos en esta jornada. Agradecemos a nuestros patrocinadores su confianza y apoyo para realizar Tijuana Innovadora 2014, Telnor, CDT, Fiden, Coca-Cola, Gran Hotel Tijuana, Café de Volada, Smurky Capa, Uber, Sears, Injuve, 21º Ayuntamiento de Tijuana y Gobierno del Estado de Baja California, y a todos los medios de comunicación por el valioso apoyo que han brindado a Tijuana Innovadora, que este año comprenden más de 30 eventos alternos, alrededor de 200 conferencias y 40 talleres sin costo, a Telemundo, a Uniradio, a Radio Latina, a Televisa Tijuana, al Diario Regional en Mexicano, al periódico Frontera, a MBC Radio, Radio Fórmula y Semanario Infobaja. Vamos a tener un breve receso y vamos a regresar con un segmento vespertino muy interesante. Vamos a presentar un interesante panel con el tema de la tercera edad. Para que regresen, vienen especialistas, viene el director del Instituto Nacional de Geriatría. Esto va a ser a las 3 de la tarde para que nos acompañen. Y a las 6, la conferencia magistral del señor Alan Bersin. Esto es Tijuana Innovadora 2014. Muy buenas tardes.